From a sinister black hearse with supernatural powers to promotional drives that literally cause traffic accidents, the iconic Ghostbusters car hides secrets stranger than the ghosts it hunted. This legendary Cadillac ambulance has crashed production schedules, concealed modern engines, and sparked fan movements, all while sporting mysterious roof equipment nobody can explain. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Ghostbusters Ecto-1 Cadillac. Fact 1. Originally designed with supernatural powers. When Dan Aykroyd first wrote the Ghostbusters screenplay, the Ecto-1 wasn't just a beat-up old ambulance, it was a supernatural vehicle with interdimensional travel capabilities. In the original script, the car could dematerialize and travel through other dimensions, allowing the Ghostbusters to evade police and navigate the spirit world directly. This concept was heavily inspired by the Bluesmobile from the Blues Brothers, which Aykroyd had co-written and starred in alongside John Belushi just 4 years earlier. In that film, the Bluesmobile performed impossible stunts and seemed nearly indestructible, surviving absurd crashes and jumps that no ordinary car could endure. Aykroyd wanted to bring that same otherworldly quality to the Ghostbusters' primary vehicle, making it as extraordinary as the paranormal threats the team would face. However, as the script went through multiple revisions and the production budget became more defined, these supernatural abilities were completely stripped away. Director Ivan Reitman and the studio executives wanted to ground the film in a more realistic version of New York City, where the supernatural elements would stand out more dramatically against an otherwise normal world. The decision to make Ecto-1 just a regular, heavily modified ambulance actually strengthened the film's comedy, as the contrast between the team's serious scientific mission and their obviously inadequate, barely functional equipment became a running joke. Instead of a sleek, powerful ghost hunting machine, audiences got a wheezing, backfiring heap that perfectly matched the Ghostbusters' underdog status as they struggled to establish their business in a skeptical city. Fact 2. Almost completely black with purple aura. The Ecto-1 we all know and love is white with distinctive red accents. But that iconic look almost never happened. Dan Aykroyd's original vision called for something far more sinister and supernatural, a completely black vehicle surrounded by an ethereal purple and white glow created by strobe lights mounted around the car's body. This darker aesthetic would have given the Ghostbusters a more mysterious, almost gothic appearance as they raced through New York City's streets at night. The black and purple color scheme was meant to emphasize the paranormal nature of their work, making the car look less like a repurposed ambulance and more like a vehicle that belonged to another dimension. However, cinematographer Laszlo Kovacs, who had worked on classic films like Easy Rider and 5 Easy Pieces, immediately recognized a serious practical problem with this design. Kovacs explained to the production team that a black car with strobe lights would be nearly impossible to film effectively during night scenes, which made up a significant portion of the movie's runtime. The dark paint would absorb light rather than reflect it, making the vehicle difficult to see clearly on camera, while the strobing lights would create inconsistent lighting that would complicate every shot. The technical challenges would have required expensive additional lighting equipment and significantly more time to set up each scene. Faced with these budget and scheduling concerns, the production team reluctantly abandoned the black and purple concept and switched to the bright white ambulance paint with red stripes that ended up becoming one of cinema's most recognizable vehicles. Fact 3. Started life as pink, gold. One of the most surprising facts about Ecto-1 is that the supposedly rundown, barely functional ambulance that Ray Stantz buys for $4,800 wasn't actually in terrible condition when production acquired it. The primary Miller Meteor ambulance used for most of the filming was actually gold in color, though some crew members and reports have described it as having a pinkish or salmon hue depending on the lighting. The vehicle was in relatively good working order when it was purchased for the production, with functioning mechanics and a clean body nothing like the rusty, neglected wreck that appears in the film. The production design team intentionally made the car look worse than it actually was by adding cosmetic damage, weathering the paint, and creating the appearance of years of neglect and poor maintenance. This transformation was essential to the story, as the condition of the car needed to visually represent the Ghostbusters' desperate financial situation and their underdog status as they started their business. The irony is that finding a genuinely beat-up 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor in working condition would have been nearly impossible, since these vehicles were already quite rare. Instead, the production team had to take a perfectly serviceable classic car and deliberately make it look like junk. After filming wrapped on the original Ghostbusters, The car retained much of this distressed appearance, even though underneath the cosmetic aging was a vehicle that could still run reliably. This deliberate downgrading of the car's appearance was so convincing that many fans assumed for years that the production had simply found an actual abandoned ambulance and fixed it up just enough to drive. Fact 4. Designer credit disaster. Behind every iconic movie vehicle is a talented designer, but in the case of Ecto-1, that designer got seriously shortchanged in the credits. Stephen Dane was the creative mind responsible for designing not only the Ecto-1, but also virtually all of the major props in the original Ghostbusters film, including the proton packs, ghost traps, and PKE meters that became instantly recognizable pieces of pop culture. Despite his crucial contributions to the film's visual identity, Dane faced a double insult in the final credits. First, his name was misspelled as Stephen Dane instead of Stephen Dane, a mistake that might seem minor, but represented a lack of attention to someone who had poured enormous creativity and effort into the production. Even worse, instead of receiving the title of production designer or even prop designer, which would have accurately reflected his role, Dane was credited merely as hardware consultant, a vague and diminished title that made it sound like he had simply provided technical advice rather than creating the film's most memorable visual elements from scratch. This wasn't just an oversight, it was a professional snub that Dane publicly resented for years afterward. In interviews and conversations with fans and collectors, Dane made his frustration clear, feeling that his vital contributions to Ghostbusters' success had been minimized, and that the industry never gave him proper recognition for work that influenced decades of science fiction design. The credit controversy highlights how even on beloved, successful films, behind the scenes, politics and oversights can leave talented artists feeling undervalued and erased from the history of projects they helped define. Fact 5. Promotional drives caused real accidents. After Ghostbusters became a massive hit in the summer of 1984, Columbia Pictures organized an ambitious promotional campaign that sent the Ecto-1 out into the real world with disastrous consequences. Actors dressed in full Ghostbusters uniforms drove the iconic vehicle through the streets of New York City as part of the film's promotional tour, intending to generate excitement and publicity. However, the production company apparently didn't anticipate just how distracting the sight of the famous car would be to everyday drivers. According to reports from the time, the promotional drives allegedly caused multiple traffic accidents as distracted motorists rubbernecked, slowed down suddenly, or swerved while trying to get a better look at the famous vehicle cruising through Manhattan. Some drivers were so shocked to see what looked like the actual Ghostbusters driving past them that they lost focus on the road entirely. The situation became serious enough that the promotional campaign had to be significantly scaled back or modified to reduce the public safety hazard. This wasn't just a case of minor fender benders. The accidents reportedly caused genuine traffic disruptions and raised liability concerns for the studio. The incident perfectly demonstrates how the line between movie fantasy and reality can blur in unexpected ways, and how the public's enthusiasm for beloved films can create genuine real-world problems. It also speaks to just how instantly recognizable and beloved Ecto-1 had become in the brief time since the film's release that people would literally crash their cars just to catch a glimpse of it driving by. Fact 6. Died on Brooklyn Bridge, got ticketed. During the filming of Ghostbusters 2 in 1989, Ecto-1 staged its own unscripted dramatic breakdown in one of the worst possible locations. The production was shooting a scene on the Brooklyn Bridge when the aging vehicle suddenly died mid-take, complete with genuine backfiring and smoke billowing from under the hood. This wasn't part of the script. The car had actually broken down for real during active filming. The timing couldn't have been worse, as the Brooklyn Bridge is one of New York City's busiest and most critical traffic arteries, carrying thousands of vehicles every day. With Ecto-1 completely disabled and blocking traffic, cars began backing up rapidly in both directions, creating a massive traffic jam that stretched for blocks. The production crew scrambled to get the vehicle started again, or at least pushed off to the side, but the damage was done. The New York Police Department was not amused by the disruption, and the production company ended up receiving hefty fines for blocking traffic and causing the massive backup. The incident added unexpected costs to an already expensive shoot and caused significant delays in the filming schedule. What makes this story even more ironic is that the breakdown happened while filming a sequel that already featured jokes about the Ghostbusters' outdated and barely functional equipment. The real-life mechanical failure simply proved what the movie was saying, that Ecto-1 was on its last legs and probably should have been retired years earlier. Despite the expensive inconvenience, the incident has become a beloved piece of Ghostbusters behind-the-scenes lore. Fact 7. Only 400 base cars ever made. One of the reasons Ecto-1 is such a valuable piece of film history has nothing to do with Ghostbusters and everything to do with automotive rarity. The 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor that served as the base vehicle was already an extremely rare collector's item before it ever appeared on screen. Only 400 of these specific combination cars were manufactured, making them uncommon even when they were new. The Miller Meteor Company specialized in building professional vehicles, primarily ambulances and hearses on Cadillac chassis, during the 1950s and 60s. These weren't mass-produced vehicles rolling off a standard assembly line, but rather custom conversions built in limited numbers for specific professional uses. The 1959 model was particularly distinctive with its massive tail fins and elongated body, representing the peak of American automotive excess before design trends shifted toward more restrained styling in the 1960s. By the time Ghostbusters went into production in the early 1980s, these vehicles were already 25 years old, and many had been scrapped, abandoned, or modified beyond recognition. Finding one in any condition was challenging, which partly explains why the production settled on a vehicle that was actually in decent shape rather than holding out for an authentically beat-up example. Today, the rarity of the base vehicle makes any surviving 1959 Miller Meteor valuable, but the handful that were converted into Ecto-1 replicas or used in the actual films are worth exponentially more. The combination of automotive scarcity and pop culture significance has made these vehicles some of the most sought-after movie cars in existence. Fact 8. Siren made from leopard snarl. The distinctive wail of Ecto-1's siren is one of the most recognizable sound effects in cinema, but its origin is far stranger than anyone would guess. Sound designer Richard Beggs created the iconic siren through an elaborate and unusual process that started with a recording of a leopard's snarl. Beggs took the animal's aggressive vocalization and reversed it, playing it backward to create an otherworldly quality that didn't sound quite like any normal siren or animal noise. But he didn't stop there. Beggs then edited the reversed leopard sound on quarter-inch magnetic tape, carefully splicing and manipulating it to create the right rhythm and pattern. Finally, he altered the playback speed, making the sound higher or lower in pitch, until he achieved the distinctive rising and falling wail that became synonymous with the Ghostbusters racing to an emergency. What makes this process even more remarkable is that Beggs later admitted this kind of elaborate sound manipulation was something he usually tried to avoid. Working with tape-based editing was time-consuming, technically challenging, and required tremendous precision. One wrong cut could ruin hours of work. In the digital age, such manipulations can be done instantly on a computer. But in 1984, every adjustment required physically cutting and splicing tape. Despite the tedious process, Beggs recognized that creating a truly unique sound for Ecto-1 was essential to the film's identity, and his experimental approach paid off brilliantly. The siren doesn't sound like a standard ambulance or fire truck, giving it an appropriately weird and supernatural quality that perfectly matches the Ghostbusters' unusual profession. Fact 9. Footage deliberately sped up. One of the most memorable moments in the original Ghostbusters is when Ecto-1 comes screaming out of the firehouse, tires squealing, and tears through New York City streets at breakneck speed. It looks impressive and urgent, perfectly capturing the excitement of the Ghostbusters racing to their first real call. However, that dramatic sequence is actually a clever trick of cinematography that hides the vehicle's real-world limitations. The 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor was a massive vehicle nearly 20 feet long and weighing approximately 3 tons when fully loaded with all the equipment and props mounted on its roof and sides. This enormous size and weight made it extremely unwieldy and surprisingly slow, nothing like the nimble emergency vehicles audiences were accustomed to seeing. Rather than accepting a sluggish-looking response scene, the production team filmed Ecto-1 driving at a much slower speed than it appears on screen, then played back the footage at a faster rate during editing. This technique, sometimes called undercranking because it involves filming at a lower frame rate, creates the illusion of rapid movement when the film is projected at normal speed. Every movement appears accelerated, the car seems to leap forward, the turns look sharper, and the whole sequence gains an energy that the actual filming never had. This wasn't unusual for action sequences in the pre-digital era, but it's particularly ironic given that Ecto-1's entire character in the film is built around being old, unreliable, and barely functional. The movie magic successfully sold audiences on the idea that this ancient ambulance could still hustle when needed. Fact 10. Price changed 3 times in scripts. The famous scene where Ray Stantz enthusiastically tells his skeptical partners that he's found them a vehicle for only $4,800 went through multiple revisions before landing on that final number. In Dan Aykroyd's earliest script drafts, the vehicle was specified as a 1975 Cadillac, which Ray claimed to have purchased for just $600, an absurdly low price that emphasized just how desperate their situation was and how terrible the car must be. As the script development continued and the production team decided to use an older, more distinctive vehicle, the year changed to 1959 and the price was bumped up to $1,400, still a bargain but slightly more realistic for a vintage Cadillac, even one in rough shape. However, by the time actual filming began, economic reality had caught up with the production. Inflation during the early 1980s was running at historically high rates, and the costs of everything associated with filmmaking were rising rapidly. Someone on the production team recognized that $1,400 seemed too cheap for any functioning vehicle, even a beat-up old ambulance, so the price was increased one final time to $4,800. This figure made it into the final film and became part of Ghostbusters canon. The multiple price changes across different drafts reveal the careful attention to detail that went into making the story feel believable, even in small moments. The writers wanted Ray's purchase to seem like a questionable decision that his partners would doubt, but not so absurdly cheap that it would break the audience's suspension of disbelief. Fact 11. Roof equipment, never explained. One of the most visually distinctive features of Ecto-1 is the elaborate array of equipment mounted on its roof, a chaotic collection of tanks, dishes, antennas, and mysterious devices that immediately communicate this is no ordinary vehicle. However, despite the prominent placement of all this gear throughout multiple films spanning decades, the actual purpose and function of most of it has never been explained in any Ghostbusters movie. Among the visible equipment are oxygen tanks, various radar dishes and satellite receivers, what appear to be heat sinks or cooling fins, coiled hoses, warning lights, and several unidentifiable boxes and instruments. Some pieces look vaguely scientific, others seem borrowed from emergency or utility vehicles, and still others appear to be complete fabrications of the props department. The lack of explanation is actually brilliant. Filmmaking the equipment doesn't need to do anything specific because it serves a visual storytelling purpose, instantly communicating that the Ghostbusters have heavily modified their vehicle for paranormal investigation and capture. The mysterious gear suggests complex ghost hunting technology without the script needing to pause and explain every piece, which would slow down the story and potentially expose the fact that most of it was purely decorative. Even in Ghostbusters Afterlife, when the car is lovingly examined and restored by Phoebe and her family, the film still doesn't provide detailed explanations of what all the roof equipment actually does. This persistent mystery has fueled decades of fan speculation and debate, with Ghostbusters enthusiasts creating elaborate theories about the function of each component. The ambiguity allows everyone to imagine their own explanations. Fact 12. Fans rescued it from decay. After the original Ghostbusters films wrapped and the promotional tours ended, the primary Ecto-1 vehicle faced an ignominious fate that would have horrified the millions of fans who loved it. The iconic car was left sitting on a backlot at Universal Studios, where it slowly deteriorated over years of neglect and exposure to the elements. Rain, sun, and time took their toll as the vehicle rusted. The paint faded and peeled, the tires rotted, and various parts either fell off or were stolen by souvenir hunters. For one of cinema's most beloved vehicles, it was a sad and undignified retirement, languishing forgotten while the film's popularity only grew. When word eventually spread through fan communities about the condition of the original Ecto-1, Ghostbusters enthusiasts were outraged. They organized petitions, contacted Sony Pictures directly, and launched online campaigns demanding that the studio rescue and restore the deteriorating vehicle that had become such an important piece of popular culture history. The fan pressure worked. Sony finally recognized they had been neglecting a valuable asset and authorized a comprehensive restoration. In 2009, the company invested over $50,000 to bring Ecto-1 back to its former glory, repairing all the mechanical damage, replacing rusted body panels, completely repainting the vehicle in its signature white and red scheme, and rebuilding or replacing all the roof-mounted equipment. The restored Ecto-1 has since appeared at fan conventions, promotional events, and special screenings, looking better than it had in decades. This story demonstrates the unique relationship between devoted fan communities and beloved franchises. Sometimes it takes passionate fans to remind corporate owners that certain pieces of film history are too important to abandon. Fact 13. LS engine swap for Afterlife. When production began on Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2019, director Jason Reitman and his team faced a serious technical challenge. The script called for significantly more intense driving sequences and stunts than the original films had featured, including high-speed chases, dramatic maneuvers, and the famous remote control sequence where young Phoebe drives the car from the gunner seat. The problem was that authentic 1959 Cadillac engines, even when fully restored, simply couldn't deliver the performance and reliability needed for modern film production stunts. The original engines were nearly 70 years old in design, prone to overheating, and lacked the power necessary for the demanding sequences. Even worse, the production team couldn't risk another Brooklyn Bridge incident where a breakdown could halt filming and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in delays. The solution was a complete engine transplant. All three replica Ecto-1 vehicles built for the film received modern General Motors LS 3 volts, 8 crate engines, the same basic power plant found in Corvettes and Camaros. These engines produce approximately 550 horsepower, dramatically more than the original Cadillac engines, and come with modern fuel injection, electronic engine management, and proven reliability. The LS3 swap meant the cars could handle any stunt the filmmakers could imagine while starting reliably every single take. From the outside, the vehicles looked identical to the classic Ecto-1, but underneath, they were essentially modern performance cars in vintage clothing. This kind of resto-mod approach has become common in automotive restoration, but it's particularly ironic for a vehicle whose entire character is built around being old and barely functional. Fact 14. Company merger created the base car. The Miller Meteor name that appears on Ecto-1 actually represents one of the more interesting corporate stories in American automotive history. Miller and Meteor were originally two completely separate companies, direct competitors in the specialized professional vehicle market during the first half of the 20th century. Both companies focused on building ambulances, hearses, and combination cars vehicles that could serve as either an ambulance or a hearse, depending on configuration, by taking standard production cars and converting them with extended bodies, special equipment, and professional features. The A.J. Miller Company, based in Ohio, and the Meteor Motor Car Company, based in Indiana, competed fiercely for contracts with funeral homes, hospitals, and emergency services throughout the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. However, in the 1950s, Wayne Corporation, a larger manufacturing conglomerate, saw an opportunity in the professional vehicle market and purchased both companies. Rather than keeping them as separate brands, Wayne merged them into a single entity called Miller Meteor, combining the reputations and expertise of both companies. This merger created one of the dominant players in the professional vehicle market during the late 1950s and 1960s. The 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor that became Ecto-1 was therefore a product of this merged company, built during the brief window when the Miller Meteor name represented the combined legacy of two former rivals. This corporate history is completely invisible in Ghostbusters, but it adds another layer of interest to an already fascinating vehicle. Fact 15. Ladder switched sides for gunner's seat. One detail that eagle-eyed Ghostbusters fans noticed immediately when watching Ghostbusters Afterlife is that Ecto-1's iconic ladder has mysteriously switched sides. Throughout the original 1984 film and its sequels, the ladder was always mounted on the passenger side of the vehicle, a standard position for emergency vehicles where it could be accessed by the crew member riding shotgun. However, in Afterlife, the ladder appears on the driver's side instead, a change that seems random until you understand the reasoning behind it. The modification was necessitated by one of the film's most significant updates to the vehicle, the addition of a suicide door gunner seat on the passenger side. This seat, which swings out dramatically to allow Phoebe to operate the remote gunner system during the film's climactic chase sequence, required the entire passenger side exterior to be reconfigured. The ladder simply couldn't remain in its traditional location because it would interfere with the gunner seat's operation, creating either a safety hazard or making the seat mechanically impossible to deploy. Rather than eliminate the ladder entirely, which would have drastically changed Ecto-1's silhouette and upset fans, The production design team made the practical decision to move it to the driver's side. This preserved the vehicle's overall appearance while accommodating the new functionality. The change represents the kind of thoughtful problem-solving that goes into updating classic designs for new stories, maintaining the iconic elements that fans expect while making necessary modifications to support new storytelling requirements. Most casual viewers never notice the switch, but for dedicated Ghostbusters fans, it's another detail to debate and analyze.